So I don't know if you guys know that I absolutely love thrifting and going to flea markets. And since I am a doll and toy lover, I of course have spotted a bunch of old dolls and toys at said flea markets. Most of them aren't in the best conditions, but as a doll artist, I can see some potential in them for a transformation. However, as a full-time YouTuber, I never really have time to make all of these small projects happen. Which is why I thought, hey, why not take the time that I usually on average need for a doll, which is usually 100 hours, and make as many projects as I possibly can in those 100 hours. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. So let's see what we're working with. So you guys are now probably wondering what kind of toys do I want to restore or customize in today's video. So let me introduce you guys to the box. So in this box I have dolls and toys that I have accumulated throughout my thrifting journey, and most of them are not in the best conditions, but I saw some potential in customizing them. And how about I just blindly grab in and fish out the first project for today? All right, let's see. What do we take first? How about this one? All right, I guess we have our first candidate. So before I get started in customizing this doll, I want to tell you guys a little bit what I could find out what kind of doll this actually is. Turns out this used to be a doll's crafting kit doll made somewhere in the 1970s or early 1980s, which means that this doll with a very high chance is around 50 years old. She looks pretty good for that, but she is very dirty and the plastic is a little stained and the hair is very knotty. I actually paid €5 for this one, but you can find them in really good condition for like 15 to 20 bucks, which is completely fine, I think. This doll is meant to be customized, so this is actually a perfect candidate for today's video. I also will be trying to keep her original hair, but it has some holes and some missing hair, so I might need to fill up some of the hairs with new hair, but I want to try to keep it. So before I'm telling you what I have in mind for this doll, because I already have an idea, I think we should start the 100-hour countdown and then give this little girl a wash and start the process. I'm excited. Her hair, I first decided to part the bangs properly from the rest of the hair and cut them to the correct length. I then left the doll to dry overnight and then used some baby pink doll hair that I found in my doll hair box to fill in the gaps. I didn't have any blonde color that came close to her strawberry blonde, so I intentionally used a completely different shade. Even though it was just a few strands that needed to be rooted, if you have ever rooted a doll head, you know that it always takes forever. Luckily, this didn't take me that long, and afterwards she looks like this. I then just need to cut the pink hair to the length of the blonde hair, style it carefully with a little heat, and flatten her bangs by putting hair wax in them and wrap a paper strap around it and let it dry. While she was drying, I decided to clean up the seam lines from the molding process on her whole body with an X-Acto knife. You can do this on any kind of plastic doll to elevate the look right away, and it looks really nice afterwards. But before we continue today's video, I want to talk to you about something that I think will make your creative process so much smoother. That's right, I'm talking about Milanote. Milanote is this super visual tool that feels like having a digital mood board that you can pin everything to. Think sketches, photos, color palettes, inspiring things you find online, notes, to-do lists, all in one place. If you're doing something creative, whether it's making dolls, making stop motion, setting up a display or photography, or designing characters, Milanote helps you gather all your ideas and organize them so you can see how they relate, what works together, what doesn't, without you having to flip through apps or lose scraps of paper. Here's how I used it for this specific video. First, I dump all of my inspiration in. References of dolls, sculpting, styles, materials, textures, fabrics, paints, basically anything that sparks my idea. Then I group them visually by theme, color, character type, scale, whatever made sense to me. I then use Milanote's boards to lay out my process. What I make first, what needs materials, and what might need special tools or paints. And you know what's the best part? That I can just move things around. Nothing is basically permanent until you decide it. Maybe first you thought one color scheme worked, but then figured out a better one later. And with the help of Milanote, you can compare, adjust, and iterate super easily. And you know what I like the most? That you can share your board with collaborators or just glance back when you're stuck. It's absolutely amazing to keep momentum. No more lost post-its. No more, wait, where did I save that file? Or did I save it? So if you are someone who does any kind of creative work, especially with visuals, Milanote is really worth checking out. You can now sign up to Milanote completely for free using the link in my description box. And I want to give a huge thanks again to Milanote for sponsoring yet another video. Using Milanote really helps me stay organized and creative, so I'm super excited for you to try it out as well. And with that being said, let's get back to the crafting goodness. Alright, so I wasn't sure if I should give this little dolly a new face or if I should just enhance the existing face up. And I asked you guys on Instagram and 63% said I should go ahead and give her a new face. 63% isn't that big of a majority though, so I went to my mom for mom's advice because mom knows best. And the moment she saw the doll, I didn't even ask her anything. She was like, oh, but you will give her a new face, right? Because, oh, that is so creepy. I was like, I guess that answers my question. I will, however, try to keep the original vibes, and I also will keep the original blue eye color. And yeah, just try to make her look even a little cuter, but still trying to keep the retro vibe. This means I first need to wipe the initial face up with some Q-tips and pure acetone. This actually brings back memories of when I used to do fashion doll face-ups back in the day. I then wrap her neatly to protect the body and the hair and spray her with Mr. Super Clear outside and let her dry for around 30 minutes. Afterwards, I could then start with the face-up and first apply some sparkly shimmers to her face like I always do, before adding some super cute blushing to her cheeks, forehead, nose and lips. I then started sketching out some new cute eyes for her and also already mapped out the eyebrow position. And when the eyes were roughly sketched out, I already decided to go in with some black acrylic paint to line her eyes. Since the doll head is really tiny and I had to draw the complete eyes, the face-up ended up taking pretty long. As you can see here, I am also going in with blue and white for the iris and the sclera of her eyes, and also decided to give her some catch lights in her eyes. I then lined the eyebrows with some brown gouache paint, and before sealing her a final time, glitter up her face with micro glitters. Those can never be missing. After the last spray, I can then gloss her lips with a glossy varnish, and after unwrapping her from her cocoon, she looks absolutely adorable. So for the little gal's dress, I really wanted to give her like a sweet Lolita dress because I felt it fits the vintage vibe so much. I found this really pretty fabric print online from Angelic Pretty actually, and decided that I wanted to print my own fabric for this little project. And luckily, I also already have a dress pattern that I actually used for a doll that I made for my grandma's birthday, and it does fit this tiny doll perfectly. So let's just quickly make the custom fabric, print out the pattern, and cut everything out. fabric, I first place this little white collar piece underneath the already cleaned up top like so and secure it with a little glue. Then I take the back pieces and will sew them along the shoulder seams, good sides in. After that was done and ironed, it looks like this, which means I can now take the collar pieces that I did clean up already off cam and sew them onto the neckline, finished side to unfinished side. Since these are tiny pieces, I usually put a paper underneath the fabric so my sewing machine doesn't devour the fabric. I can then just remove the perforated paper afterwards. After ironing the collar, it looks super cute, which means I can then prep the sleeves by sewing a lace onto the bottom of them, an elastic in the middle, and also pull in a gathering thread so that I simply have to sew the puffy sleeves finished sides in onto the top now. Now just the sleeve and side seams are missing, so I sew these real quick and it looks amazing afterwards. I glued around the seam allowances of the skirt already and will now also sew a small lace to it and gather it already. So I can then finally join the top and bottom part of the dress together. It looks so beautiful already, but I felt something was missing, so I decided to cut up a small lace and glue it around the little bib piece in the front like this, and also add a tiny red satin ribbon that I made to the top of the collar. For button imitation, I added some golden half beads to the bib piece as well. I felt the dress was missing a back ribbon, so I decided to make one since I had some fabric left over, and then just hand stitched it onto the back of the dress. I also made her some tiny hair ribbons and added them to her hair, and for the closure of the dress I decided to recycle that one perfectly functioning button from her old broken dress and added a new one because I would need two of them. I think it's cute that I recycled something from the old dress to use in the new one. I then simply hand stitched them onto the dress, and with that the dress for this dolly is done, and I'm really happy how it turned out. The print is just so adorable. For underneath her dress I also wanted to make her panties, so I simply took her old ones and traced the pattern onto some paper, cleaned up the lines a bit, then cut it from some white jersey fabric and simply glue around the leg hole and top and bottom seam allowances. After doing so, I then simply have to sew together the side seams, finished sides in, and with that the panties are done. I always call panties Schlüppi in German, and I think that's such a funny word. To make her shoes, I will also be using the shoe file that I used for my grandma's doll, sized it down a little and already printed it in some leftover resin while making the outfit. I then just need to clean it up and spray paint them red to fit the outfit of the doll. Absolutely in love with this cherry red, by the way. And to finish off the outfit, I also made her some tiny socks real quick off cam. Which means that I can now dress her up for the first time and see how she looks like all done. But I will only show you all the finished projects in the very end, so you have to watch the whole video in order to see everything for the big presentation. Okie dokie, so the first project is done now and we have about 90 hours and 26 minutes left, which means we have time for a bunch of other projects, I hope. So let me grab the box real quick. And for this next project, I'm actually not going to blindly search for something because I do have an idea of what I would like to do next. This little fella. You can see there is not much original paint or anything left, and I got this for, I believe it was 1 or 2 euros on a flea market this year, and I just thought it was so cute, and if I paint it and bedazzle it with a bunch of cute little things, it could look so cute. So that's what we're gonna do next. Okay, so for the background of the store, I couldn't find much either on this one, other than it was also produced in Hong Kong, but this is, I believe, even older than the other doll. This is like from the 1960s, and I would have restored it to look like it used to look like, but I couldn't really find any pictures of how it actually used to look, because all the photos of the dolls I could find online were faded or just not in great condition. And I found one where there's kind of still a face up, and to be quite honest, it's not great. So I want to give it a really cute little makeover and also obviously keep the nostalgia a little bit, but also make it a little bit more Moonlight Jewelry. I just think she deserves a little cute makeover. I keep rambling. We should start. I think the initial sculpt of this doll is really cute, but she definitely needs some love, so I decided to first remove that little bit of face that she still has before washing her with some warm soapy water, and just like I did with the other doll, decided to clean up the seam lines. It was a little harder on this one for some reason because I'm not sure what kind of plastic it was, but it was horrendous to work with. I also sculpted her some cute front hairs with some epoxy sculpt, but my card was full, so I sadly don't have much footage of that, but I absolutely love the curls. I now needed to let her dry until the next day and then sealed her with MSC to start with the face. After glittering it up, I added some blushing with pastels, and then I tried sketching out the eyes with a pencil. And did I say that this material was horrendous to work with? Because the pencil would not stick even after multiple layers of Mr. Super Clear, so I essentially had to sketch the eyes with acrylic paint, which was so difficult. It took so long because you have to be careful and mistakes are not that easy to remove, right? Once the eye was sketched though, I could then fill in the eye with white and green paint and then had the honor of manually mirroring the eye with acrylic paint again. I somehow made it work, but it did take way longer than I would have expected. I eventually did make the face up work though and added some cute details to her face in the end before glittering and glossing her up for the final touches. But we weren't done painting yet because I also needed to paint her whole body since everything was sculpted on. So first for her hair, I of course had to pick a beautiful baby pink and only needed around 1 million layers for the paint to be completely opaque on her head, and then decided it would be extra cute and time consuming to add some more painted baby hairs and also some shading with pastels for a bit more dimension. I already can't believe that this is the same doll from a couple hours ago, by the way, and the head is now completely done and so cute. Which means I can now start with painting the body. I thought a lilac dress would be adorable with the pink hair, so I started painting the dress, cleaning up any mistakes with an X-Acto, and paint the little flower on her dress in a pastel yellow. I then took the same pink I used for painting her hair to paint her shoes and decided to make them extra glossy with some UV top coat. I then also decided to add some blushing to her body and dress, and in the end could finally join the head and the body together again. To further bedazzle her, I gave her a beaded necklace made of small vibrant pink beads and some wire, gave her a little fake bag with a star-shaped charm, and made this little ribbon that I glued to the back of her dress. And she of course needed a hair ribbon that I sewed off cam real quick, and then found these tiny ribbons in my stash that were a perfect fit for her shoes, the little bag, and I also painted some in pink to add to her hair as well. And with that she is finally done, and I think taking my time here really paid off, and she just looks so adorable. I especially love the hand sculpted hair. Alright, 2 projects done and we are down to 80 hours. I needed way longer than I thought to paint this one, but multiple layers of paint take time apparently. So I guess we shouldn't waste any more time and choose the next project, shall we? Let me grab the box. Alright, what should we do next? I think I have an idea what I want to do. I'm saving this one for later, you might have seen it already, but we're gonna do that later because now I have one project that I really want to do. And it's this one. This is a Diva Stars doll. Her name is Alexa from 1999, second wave of the Diva Stars dolls. And I really want her to be the next project. So let's work on her. I actually got this doll for €2, which is amazing because I know that they go for a lot more online. That's also the reason why I'm not gonna be customizing her too much. Like, I'm not gonna touch the face and the actual doll, but I will do her hair nicely, and she came with accessories that my doll for €2 did not come with. So I'm going to be recreating her sunglasses, the handbag and the shawl in my style to make it fit this little dolly. So let's make her as glamorous as she's supposed to be. While the Diva Stars doll is drying, I decided to make her some sunglasses. Luckily, I could reuse Blossom's sunglasses and just had to size them accordingly to her head size and shape. Then cut them from paper first to see how they look like and corrected them a little since I liked the thicker frame more. And then I could cut them from some iridescent acrylic sheets, glue them together with acrylic glue and finish them off with some tiny cute little pink nail art flowers and the tiniest golden beads. I then wanted to make her a new shawl and was about to use this lilac plush fur first, but after making it I didn't really like the look of it, so I decided to use this pink fur fabric instead and already prepped it and now just need to sew on a button to it so I would be able to open and close it easily. I also found this little purple ribbon bead in my stash and simply sew it to the front of the shawl because I thought it looked cute. To make her handbag, I found this really big gemstone in my crafting supplies and also had a small container left that I want to use for the body of the bag, and first traced the shape of the container to some clear vinyl that I then cut out in a kind of a half circle and then used some uwu glue to glue it to the container. I then take the gemstone and glue it to the front of the handbag and also decided to glue some rhinestone chain around it for some extra pizzazz. In the end, I simply glue a little chain around the back, and since the Diva Stars doll was finally dry, I could then go ahead and style her hair. I first removed the curler from the bangs, trim off any excess, and then decided to give her some pigtails from the upper section of her hair. It looks so cute already afterwards, and I just think she is missing some cute flowers on her hair ties that I luckily had laying around and just glue them to the pigtails. And then I just need to add the shawl, the handbag, and sunglasses, and my Diva Stars custom is done. Alright, so this was a rather quick project because we are now at 76 hours and 58 minutes, so I only needed a couple hours for this one. And actually Joe requested the next one personally. He was like, hey, can you do the Munchi? So let me grab that from the box. Ooh, let's grab the Munchi. Where do we have it? There it is. This little guy. So I'm not quite sure if this is an actual authentic Munchi or if it's a bootleg or something. I think it's from the former East German side. And I got this for €5 and it's so cute. However, the fur is not very nice anymore and it's also very like discolored here on the forehead. So I was thinking of completely making a new body for this little guy. So I would say we wash this little guy really thoroughly and then see what we can do with this little one. It's so cute. Look at it. I then tried to trace the pattern of the Munchi as good as I could because I'm actually going to preserve the original fur by basically making a fursuit that I will be putting on top of the little guy. This way I actually won't destroy any of the old dolls. When I had my initial fabric pieces ready, it was time to make a mock-up to see if everything fits nicely, so I took some mock-up fabric that I always have there, cut all the pieces out and then sew them together loosely to see if everything fits. To check that, I simply pulled the pieces on top of the Munchi and it actually worked out really well, which means that I can now go ahead and cut the pieces from the final fabric. I chose this beautiful lilac fur fabric. It's so soft and I think it's gonna fit perfectly with the Munchi. To cut it, I'm using a fabric marker first and trace all the pieces onto the fabric to make sure that I sew them accurately along the sewing lines, then remove the paper pieces and cut them out. First, I will sew the hood that I already pinned together and turn it inside out. And then I will sew a little part on the back of the fursuit and also sew the front pieces of it in the same run. Since I marked all the sewing lines, it was very easy to sew the pieces together because I knew exactly where I had to sew. It was an extra step, but it was really worth it. As you can see, I did already sew on one of the sleeves here and will be doing the same now to the other side along the armhole. But this time the seam will actually be on top of the arm instead of the bottom. To make those seam lines pretty much disappear though, you can use a slicker brush and brush them invisible. See? You cannot see the seam. So cool. And now I can close the top seam of the sleeve to finish the sewing for the bodice. Afterwards, I just have to turn the whole thing inside out, brush the seams again and have a cute little bodice. The tail is just a folded piece that I will sew with a round tip, and with all the pieces now now prepared, I can then start the glow up process of this little guy. First I put on the bodice and in the same run slide the new tail onto the old tail, which was a little tricky, but with tweezers it went okay. Since the plushie was very loosely filled, I decided to stuff it with some new filling in between the old and new fur to make them extra fluffy. And when I was satisfied with the plushiness, I then needed to make the seams around the hands and feet tight, and I did that by basically gathering them by hand and sewing them onto the old fur underneath. And then all I needed to do still was hand sew the tail onto the fursuit, close the back seam of it by hand, and sew on the hood onto the old fabric as well. Since the hood was just glued on before, I will use the same method and use some contact adhesive to glue the hood onto the head again. It turned out really nice, which means that I can now fix up the face. I really love the original face up, so I will only be adding some new brown paint to the little nose, and it looks super cute afterwards. Pretty much like new. Since it's me customizing the little guy though, I of course wanted to give it a cute little collar that I already prepared here, button it around the neck, and will now make a ribbon for the collar from the same fabric by basically sewing 2 miniature pillowcases first and then just gather them together with a few hand stitches. I then just need to glue the middle fabric strip around the ribbon and then glue the ribbon onto the collar. It's so cute, oh my god. In the end, I decided to make the Munchi a little hairband and another ribbon that I will be now adding by hand on top of their little head, and also add a little gemstone to the ribbons. I still did a little fixing up after actually finishing the little Munchi, like cutting off some loose threads and stuff like that. And I actually most of the time do this to my dolls as well, even when they're done. Okay, so with that little Munchi done, we are now down to 70 hours and 37 minutes, which is crazy. I didn't think I would be this fast with so many projects already, which is really cool though. And for the next project, I'm going to be using, I don't know if you saw them already in the box, but I have a bunch of these tiny little LOL figures that I purchased on flea markets because they're usually just a couple cents. Because I really like them. I think they are so cute and I really wanted to always do something with them, and I never really knew what until I saw what Doll August on Instagram was doing with his little Bratz baby dolls, because he turned them into plushie keychains, and that is just so cool. So I thought, how about I do this with these small LOL dolls? But that means I need to go now, make patterns, make a mock-up, which will probably take a while, and if everything works out, I might make a couple of those, depending on how much time it takes, but it would be so nice to just repurpose them into something that you can actually use as a little back charm or something like that. So I'm gonna take these all out and get going. I actually have a bunch of these little dollies that I got for super cheap on several flea markets. I won't be able to turn them all into back charms, I think, but maybe a few. First, I will be needing to make a pattern though for them, so I start by trying to pattern out the head somehow with the cling film and tape method, and then traced the cut up pattern pieces onto some paper. The actual body will just be like a little bean shape, and the arms and legs will be little door arches. Before I can make a mock-up, I needed to prep the doll by basically cut off the faceplate with an X-Acto. You want to cut it in front of the ears, but so that you still have enough space to sew on the plush later. And I also need to cut off half of the arms and legs because I want them to still have her hands and feet later on. Okay, so I decided to go off cam because I really needed to figure this pattern out and make a little mock-up and stuff like that. And it took longer than I would have thought. But the result is this little worm so far. It's actually another doll than the one I showed in the video, because I happened to find another one and it didn't have like much hair, so I could really try to make this work, and it actually looks kind of okay. It's not completely perfectly stuffed and everything, but I think this now works. And you already see I had to make some adjustments to my pattern, and with all of that we are down to 68 hours. It really took a long time to do this, but now we can actually start making the first little actual keychain that is not a worm. And I really like this purple fur, and I would use it for this little girl as well. And I was thinking, let's make her a little kitty. In order to make the back charm, I first traced the pattern pieces for the body onto the plush fabric, cut them out and sew them together, but leave the top seam open. Then I turn it inside out, brush the seams and stuff it with some plushy fluff. I already sewed the kitty ears here and glue some white velvet pieces inside of the ears. Now I need to sew the darts on the back of the head pieces to prep them, and I also need to sew sew the kitty ears and a little keychain loop to the front piece of the hat. And for the difficult part of the whole thing, I now need to hand sew the front hat piece onto the faceplate by hand. This was not easy to do. I did make it work, but it took a while. It does look so good afterwards though, so the work really paid off. I then take my back pieces and sew them together along the back seam, but leave a gap open and then pin and sew the back pieces of the hat to the front piece, finished sides in. I also close the neckline by hand and then can stuff the whole thing with some more fluff before closing the back seam on the hat with a few hand stitches as well. I absolutely love the little hat of the spectrum already and can now slap on the body by hand as well. And yes, I forgot to film the transition here. To prep the arms and legs, I first glue around the bottom seam allowances and then sew them together, but leave also a small gap open to turn it inside out. And then glue the arms and legs into the opening on the bottom. To secure them more, I also pull a gathering thread into them and pull it nice and tight. And then I take a tiny amount of fluff and stuff them. The finished arms and legs look like this. And here's also the body. And now the last thing left to do is to sew on the arms and legs with a thicker rip-resisting thread. Oh, look at this little kitty! To finish the little cat off, I also want to give her a little ribbon around her neck, and since this is a bead, I can simply sew it on. And for the rest of the back charm, I wanted to add a few more things I found in my stash. First, a little bell around her body, and then this big safety pin. On that I added some bedazzlement as well. I'm so in love with this back charm, and I'm glad that it turned out this well since I never made something like this before. By the way, if you want to buy something from this video, a couple of items that I transform in this video will be available in my shop after the video goes live. You can find the link to my shop in the description box. Also, I just relaunched my Patreon on October 1st. So if you want exclusive behind the scenes footage, digital or even physical rewards, exclusive polls, access to a Patreon only Discord server, and Patreon only live streams every now and then, now is your chance to join. Link is also in the description box. Okay, so number 1 is done and she turned out so cute. I'm like so happy. And we are now down to around 63.5 hours. I do think we can get away with making a couple more because I really want to make a rabbit and a bear as well. And usually the first one where you have to figure everything out takes the longest. So hopefully I won't need so long with making a couple more. We are finally done with the 3 little keychains and I absolutely love how they turned out. However, I did need a long time to make all of these. Not just the plushies, but also the little accessories took some time because I needed to see what actually fits each keychain and so on. So we are actually down to pretty much 52 hours, which means we are pretty much at halftime because I actually yesterday evening did go home and already worked on a little concept for the next project, which is finally going to be the ancient labubu. I did stop the time on how long I needed for the little mock-up, and it was about 1 hour and 18 minutes, which means I'm going to subtract that from these 52 hours and 3 minutes, which leaves us with 50 hours, 45 minutes and 32 seconds. So we are indeed pretty much at halftime now. So for this little guy, I definitely first have to wash it. And if you're asking what this is a plushie from approximately the 1970s, and it is a Sonneberg plushie, which was a company that produced these vinyl-faced plushies. And this is a little rabbit. It's so cute, but it is very old. The ears are almost falling off. And I think what I'm gonna do is similar to the Munchi, I wanna make plush suit for it, but I also wanna make a cute little outfit, and I wanna touch up the face so it looks a little cuter, but I definitely will keep the essence of the original plush. This was, by the way, €5, and I first didn't buy it and I regretted it. And a couple weeks later, I saw the same vendor and he still had this, and I was like, I'm gonna take this little one home. Let's wash this little guy first. Then we have to make some patterning for the fursuit. I really love this little guy, but I feel they deserve a glow up as they were laying in the dirt on the flea market, which also means they need a thorough wash first. Since this was a fairly huge plushie, I asked my grandma to help me with the washing because she also owns a Wäscheschleuder, which drains most of the water after washing, so the drying doesn't take so long. It's basically a small tumbler without the drying function. It still needs to dry after tumbling, but it smells so incredibly good now and is much cleaner already. And since it was evening, I called it a day for that day and could start fresh the next day, and will now need to do the tedious part, which is patterning the fursuit for this guy. It was essentially the same process as for the Munchi, but for some reason it was much harder. I think because of the sheer size of the plushie and the bigger possibilities for errors. Also, the seams of the plushie were super odd, so I needed ages to even make the first pattern. Then cut everything from mock-up fabric and then sew together the whole thing, and it's not great. You can see that the head cap is way too big and the shape is off, and also the bodice is too large and has odd wrinkles in the crotch that needed some more work. So I needed to work quite a bit on my initial patterning, as you can see, but after hours of trial and error, I made it work and can now finally use the final fur fabric for this little guy. I wanted to make a two-colored version as well, so I decided for lilac and light yellow. I really love this color combination, and luckily I had quite a lot of both colors to make this big plushie work. So I traced and cut out all the pieces from the lilac and yellow fabric and end up with something like this. I then first sew the pants onto the upper body, and I'm so happy that this fabric sews so unproblematically. I have to do this step twice for the front and back parts, and then place both on top of each other and sew it together along the side and crotch seams good sets in. As you can see, I also pinned the circle pieces to the end of the leg pieces and sew them on as well. This was actually a bit tricky to do, but if you take your time, nothing is impossible. With the feet sewn, I can... That sounds so wrong. With the feet sewn. With the feet sewn, I can then take the sleeve pieces and pin and sew them along the armholes good sides in. I sew them both in one go, and afterwards only need to close the upper sleeve seams. I do leave them open a little more though, so that I will be able to pull the fursuit onto the plushie later on. Now all that is left to do is the hood, which was an easy thing to sew. Okay, so I have the hat helmet part sewn together, and I have the little the little onesie. It looks so cute actually, but I did run into some trouble with the ears because the way that they are made on the rabbit is two equal pieces, but I think two different lengths of fur. But if I use the same length of fur, the ears are like this, and I did not really like that. I tried something else and nothing really worked, so I had to iterate the pattern for the ears once more, and I then made a little try. This is like super crookedly sewn and there's a little cut in here and stuff, but this now works and it looks really cute. It looks more like an actual rabbit ear, but that also means we are down now to 40 hours and 45 minutes. It really took so long, but I wanted to make it nice, right? But with the ears now working out, I already actually cut them out. Like I have all the pieces laying here on the table, which means we now just have to sew these together, and then we can finally put the little bunny into the new fursuit. the vinyl was actually pretty stained and UV damaged, even if you can't really tell that on cam, I decided I wanted to paint the little guy a new face. For that, I first removed the old face with acetone, then wrapped it neatly into kitchen paper and masking tape, and luckily I still had some light skin tone spray paint left over from my Hoyoverse dolls. It is lighter than the original, but much closer to the actual original skin tone that these plushies used to have, so I thought it was a pretty good match. When all dry and primed with MSC, I then go ahead and give this little guy some soft blushing after I sprinkled on the usual dosage of micro glitter. I blush the mouth darker and also give the nose and forehead some blushing before painting the sclera of the eyes with white acrylic paint. I needed 2 coats for full coverage and then decided to give it some pale blue eyes, so I paint the irises of the eyes. I wanted to keep the whole face up close to the original face up, just make it even a little cuter. After I was satisfied with the irises, I then take a dark gray pencil and sketch out the pupils and also the eyeliner and lashes of this little ancient labubu. I will now fill in one side with acrylic paint already and also mirror the sketch to the other side so that I can paint the same eye again, just mirrored, which is always easier said than done. For the nose, I will go with the cute brown shade again and paint it in a circle just like the original nose. And of course, some highlights in the eyes can't be missing. They always give so much life to the eyes in my opinion. In homage to the original whiskers on the plushie, I decided to paint them as well, but a little cuter and friendlier than the original. Awesome! Almost done! Just some sparkly shimmers before the last ceiling is missing, because I of course want the one and only 24 karat gold labubu. And then I can finally unwrap my little guy from their kitchen paper prison, and it is so adorable, oh my god! Alright, so we are actually now a little bit more into the future because yesterday evening, after finishing the face of the plushie, I also went ahead and made the little kimono pattern off cam and also made a little mock-up. It only has one sleeve and no collar and no obi, but it works. And I really like how it looks like already. However, for the fabric of the kimono, I wanted like a really cute retro toy pattern because it fits this little plushie so well. And unfortunately, I couldn't really find any beautiful pre-made pattern online that I could download. But I did find a really beautiful fabric that you could purchase. But since I didn't want to purchase anything for this project, my amazing friend Blue Pixie came to the rescue and was so kind to draw all of these little animals in high resolution so that I could then go ahead and make the pattern according to this template in Adobe Illustrator myself. And with all the time needed for patterning the kimono and for setting up the pattern, plus the 2 hours and 32 minutes that Blue Pixie needed for drawing the little animals, we are now down to 25 hours. 28 hours and 5 minutes. The good thing is though that I can now go ahead and prep the freezer paper fabric sheets and then sew the kimono and finish up the plushie with making the little outfit. I was super excited to make this kimono and the fabric turned out absolutely adorable. And I filmed the whole process and sewed the whole thing, but then I realized something. So I finished the kimono on the little guy and I don't like it because it turned out way too pale and not vibrant enough. However, I can't make it more vibrant because I just cannot print these colors that I want with my printer. So I'm gonna make the fabric differently, which means I will cut out all the little polka dots from fabric vinyl and then make the little animals printable and cuttable with the Cricut machine of my sister's company. This actually took ages because I might have already done it because I got really frustrated and just want to finish a really cute little kimono for this little plushie. And I also changed the pattern so that it won't be a classic kimono but more like a kimono dress, kind of like these Lolita dresses. This is a ton of work. We are down to 21 hours because sewing that kimono took ages, and also making the pattern iterations and the fabric pattern iterations took so long. I didn't think this project is gonna be this time consuming, but this is usually the stuff that doesn't make the cut in my YouTube videos because it happens quite a lot that I make stuff 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times until I am satisfied. I decided to iron the fabric print onto some pastel yellow fabric because I did not have enough pink fabric in the correct shade left, but I really love how the print turned out. I actually almost like it more on yellow. After sewing together the back seam of the jacket finished sides in, I also attached the front pieces along the shoulders. I then sewed a lace trim along the opening of the sleeve onto the upper fabric first, and now layer it with some lining fabric and sew both pieces together along the sleeve opening. Afterwards, I pressed the seams nice and flat, then fold the sleeves like this and close the bottom and side seams. When turned inside out, the sleeve looks like this, which means I can now sew the upper fabric onto the armhole of the jacket first and then hem the lining by hand. With the side seams also closed, I then pin a lace to the neckline first and secure it with my sewing machine. And then I take this long strip for the collar, fold it in half and slap it on. The jacket is done so far, which means I first make the waistband for the skirt by cleaning up the edges with my serger, and then I'm taking the prepped skirt piece and pin and sew the waistband on it good sides in. Afterwards, the skirt looks like this, and I now just need to add a velcro to the back. For the obi, the belt, I simply sewed a pillowcase from pink fabric and added a cute lace trim that I now just have to sew on while paying attention not to sew down the tiny ribbons on it. For the final touches, I also made a ribbon for the head of the little rabbit and sew it on with a few stitches. And with that, the little rabbit is finally done. Oh god, I can't believe we're finally done with the little labubu. I can't believe how long this project took, but it was because I failed that first kimono and had to completely make it new. So we have now 10 hours and 37 minutes left, which probably is enough time for one more project. At least I hope so. And I actually went to the flea market last Sunday and I picked up this little teddy bear. It is so cute. I think what I want to do is I want to turn it into a handbag, but I don't want to like destroy it and cut it open, take out the stuffing and stuff, because it would be very small. I would not fit a lot of stuff, but I want to do something else. I already thought of something and I'm gonna show you, but first, like with all the other toys, it needs a thorough wash because it's very dirty. Am I the only one that thinks that stuffed animals have a soul? Whenever they stare at me, I just have to take them. All right, let's do this. Teddy was all dry, I first used a slicker brush to make the fur a little fluffy again. It worked quite well, so after brushing it all out, I then traced the shape of the bear onto a piece of paper that I then scanned and prepped in a vector file, which I will be able to cut from a thin plastic sheet with my laser cutter. I will only be needing this frame and first glue some bedding onto one side of it with some Sprühkleber. I cut the bedding roughly already and will just remove the excess after gluing it on. After doing so successfully, I then use some more spray adhesive that I spray onto the back side of the outside fabric and then place the plastic sheet for the back of the bag onto it and glue the edges around the whole piece with some more glue. It looks even better than I thought afterwards, which means that I will now do the same to the front part of the bag and the side strips that I made with 2mm EVA foam. To make the back side of the pieces look nicer, I decided to cut and iron some glitter fabric vinyl that I cut with a Cricut on some white fabric. The peeling process is always so satisfying. I then, however, need to cut out everything by hand while being in shrimp position and then glue the glitter pieces to the back side of the back pieces. I was happy it worked out so nice, so I did a little dance, and after fighting to thread in the puller of this endless zipper that I cut to length, I can then glue in the zipper with some contact adhesive. I do that to both sides and then take my long side strip on which I pinned some loops for the rings later on and first secure them with a couple stitches. And after doing so, I then take the zipper pieces and the long side strap and sew them together, finished sides in. I'm absolutely amazed how good this looks, by the way, and was really hoping that I measured correctly and the side strap would actually fit around the back piece. To attach the side strap, I used some contact adhesive and luckily it did indeed fit. However, for extra security, I decided to also sew the pieces together by hand, which did take an eternity, but it was really worth it, I think. Before being able to attach the front piece, I will now sew the teddy into it. Yes, you heard right. I basically pushed the teddy halfway through the opening and sew it in place so that it essentially is sitting inside the frame. I just thought that was really cute. And I'm not destroying the teddy. I don't know how long it took to sew the teddy in. I think it was around 40 minutes, but it is adorable and almost looks like something you could hang on the the wall. And with this step done, I can then attach the back piece of the bag to the front with some contact adhesive. I then placed the bag in between my epoxy putty cups so it would lay flat, and then decided to attach a lace trim around the edge of it. Hot glue was the best solution here, and it looks really good afterwards. I was lucky that I still had these golden openable rings that I could now thread onto the back loops, and now just need a strap for the back. I had this heart-shaped chain belt laying in my stash because I ended up never wearing it, but it had the perfect length for a shoulder strap. So I simply attached it with some carabiners, and it works like a charm. I still had about 2 hours left, so I decided to make some more ribbons and bedazzlement for the front of the bag. So first I sewed a little pillowcase with rounded edges from pastel yellow fabric, and then decided to add some fluff to it to make it a puffy ribbon. I then just gathered it in the middle, and it turned out so good in the end. This ribbon will be added to the top of the bear with a couple of hand stitches. I made another ribbon for the neck of the bear as well, and top it off with a heart-shaped gemstone. And then I also made some cloud shapes from white velvet fabric. These just need to be traced onto the white fabric and cut out roughly. I then simply need to sew them and just leave a gap open to turn them inside out after cutting away the seam allowances. Stuff them with some fluff, then sew them shut, and with this little cloud and some more accessories that I already made before, I can now attach them to the bag as well. I arranged how I wanted them to look like before, and then used some hot glue to attach them to the bag. In the very end, I also really quickly made some bracelets for the bear from a necklace that I had laying around, and I didn't think I would be working on this project until literally the last second, but I did because I also decided to glue some leftover beads onto the bag as well. Ah, finished! I'm done! I'm done! Yay! Oh my god! Oh my god, guys, we are done. 100 hours of work and 7 projects later. I'm so happy how everything turned out, but I'm sure you guys want to see everything as well now. So here it is, the final presentation. Yay! And here are all the projects from this video. I was so happy how much I was able to achieve in 100 hours. But I want to know, which project did you like the most? Please let me know in the comments below. I can't really decide for myself, but if I had to choose, I would probably choose the ancient labubu, just because it turned out to be such a difficult project, but in the end turned out so adorable. Again, if you want to check my store, link is in the description box below. And also, if you want to check out my Patreon, you find the link there as well. For the next video, I hope that you guys are ready for spooky season. Alright, that's it for this one. Bye!